At my daughter's 8th birthday, my mother mocked her for calling me mom, then handed out gifts to every other grandchild but not her. My dad and sister seemed to agree. I didn't shout. I acted. The next morning, their lives started falling apart. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, cake, cousins, pictures I could post later. Mom had offered to throw the party. "Let me do this one," she said, like she was granting me a favor. I told myself it meant she was finally coming around, that maybe this was her way of making peace with my daughter. I should have known better. She scheduled it for 3 o'clock, right in the middle of my shift. "You'll be home by 5, she said. "We'll keep her busy until then." That sounded reasonable at the time. Hope makes people blind. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the windows glowed with party lights. Music and laughter spilled outside, the kind of loud that means sugar and chaos. Inside, the air was sticky with frosting and balloon rubber. Kids were everywhere. 5 cousins, paper hats sliding off their heads. My sister was perched on the sofa, scrolling her phone. My dad sat in his usual corner chair, pretending to read messages. And in the center, my mother, holding court like the hostess of the century. Everyone looked busy, loud, happy. Everyone except the one person who was supposed to be celebrated. "Where's Peggy?" I asked. My sister didn't even glance up. "Bathroom, I think." Too quick. Too smooth. Something in my chest went tight. The hallway was quiet compared to the living room. I knocked once, then pushed the door open. Peggy sat on the floor, her yellow dress crumpled, party hat slipping sideways. Her eyes were red. She looked up when she heard me and tried to smile, the way kids do when they've already learned not to cry in public. "What happened?" I asked. She picked at the ribbon on her wrist. "Grandma laughed at me." Her voice was small. "I called you Mom and she laughed." "She said I shouldn't say that you're not my real mom." She said it like she was confessing to something terrible. The room tilted. I crouched down next to her. "She said maybe you'll change your mind," Peggy whispered. "She said sometimes people do." I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached for her hand. "Look at me," I said. "I am your mom. Always. No one gets to decide that but us." Her chin trembled. She nodded. Then, almost in a whisper, "She gave everyone else a present." I swallowed hard. "Did she?" Peggy nodded. "She said maybe next year I'll get one." When I'm really family, I took a breath, slow and deliberate, until the dizziness eased. "Okay," I said. "Let's get you cleaned up." We washed her face, fixed her hair, and found her small notebook, the one she carried everywhere, pages covered with drawings and lists of good things she wanted to remember. Silently, we got up and went to her room. She climbed onto the bed and kept the notebook beside her, tracing one of the pages with her finger. I sat for a while, just to make sure she felt safe again. When her breathing steadied, I knew I could step out for a moment. "I didn't do anything bad," she murmured. "I know," I said. "You did everything right." I turned off the lamp and left the door half open so she could still hear the sounds from the hallway, soft and far away. The living room was still a blur of color when I came back. The cousins had moved on to a video game tournament, shrieking at the screen. My mother sat with a glass of punch, pleased with herself. My father kept his eyes on his phone. I stood there long enough for someone to notice me. No one did. "Party's over," I said. Nothing. "Party's over," I repeated, louder this time. My sister smirked. "Oh, relax, Julia. They're just finishing a round." I crossed the room and pulled the plug from the socket. The screen went black. The kids groaned. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. I told them quietly, "The party's over. Everyone needs to leave." My mother blinked up at me. "Julia, what's gotten into—" "Now," That one word seemed to land. Chairs scraped. Wrapping paper rustled. My sister muttered something about me being so dramatic, but she gathered her kids. Within minutes, the room emptied, leaving the smell of frosting and confusion behind. When the door closed after the last cousin, only my parents stayed seated. My mother crossed her arms. "We're not leaving," she said, a sharp laugh under her breath. "We live here." I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. I turned around and walked back to my daughter's room. Behind me, I heard my father sigh and my mother whisper, "What's wrong with her?" like I was the one who'd lost my mind. Peggy was still awake, drawing tiny flowers in her notebook. I sat on the edge of her bed and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. Something in me shifted then, quietly, like a lock turning. No more pretending this was normal. No more explanations. No more letting them decide what family means. I sat there, watching her breathe, promising myself this would never happen again. Something had shifted, and life as we knew it had already begun to fall apart. I used to think every family had a favorite. In mine, it just wasn't me. My brother Adam was the firstborn and the family project. Everything revolved around making sure he succeeded. Tutors, extra classes, summer programs, new laptop, the works. If he slipped below an A, panic. If he aced something, relief. At our house, love came with a report card. My younger sister Lily was the baby. She didn't have to earn attention. She arrived with it. Miss a curfew? She's just independent. Forget homework? She's creative. Whenever she wanted something, Mom found a reason it was good for her confidence. And me? I was the middle one. Reliable, inexpensive, background noise. When Adam needed silence to study, I kept Lily busy. When Mom needed someone to vent to, I listened. When I asked for help, there was never time or money left. Once I asked for a math tutor. Mom smiled. "Honey, you're not built for that kind of pressure. Be happy with a B." That was the moment I learned some kids get investment, others get excuses. So I did what overlooked kids do. I stayed helpful. It looked like independence, but it was survival. And it worked. Right up until it didn't. Years passed, and the pattern never changed. Adam became exactly what they'd built. Ambitious, always away, 2 kids, constant motion. Lily stayed the favorite, just older. 3 children, constant drama, always rescued. And me? Still steady, still useful, still the one expected to show up when everyone else couldn't. Then my parents' finances collapsed. They'd poured money into Adam's degrees and Lily's down payment and somehow forgot to save a dime for themselves. When they finally needed help, they didn't go to Adam or Lily. They came to me, because apparently being responsible is the same as running a charity. They asked if they could stay just for a few months. And of course, I said yes. Because that's what the reliable one does. She hosts the people who call her boring at dinner parties. They moved into our guest room. Mom promised, "You won't even notice we're here." That promise lasted about a week. Half my kitchen had been rearranged. Dad had opinions on my grocery budget. By the second month, they'd claimed the house like it came with their names on the deed. I told myself to be patient. They were my parents. It was temporary. Besides, part of me still wanted them to finally see me, not as backup, but as a grown woman who'd built a life. Instead, they noticed the dust on the ceiling fan. When my husband and I decided to adopt, their disapproval was instant. Mom froze, then said, "You're still young enough to try again." I told her we couldn't, that my husband couldn't have children. She already knew, but saying it out loud made her face harden. She gave a small shrug. "Then maybe you should think about finding someone who can." The room went quiet. I stared at her, waiting for her to realize what she'd just said. She didn't. She just kept stirring her coffee like we were discussing the weather. Finally, she tried to backtrack. Or maybe a donor? You could still have one that's yours. It wasn't comfort. It was damage control. Anything but adoption. Anything that didn't bring someone else's child into their family. I stopped explaining after that. Then Peggy came into our lives, 6 years old, big eyes, quiet but stubborn. She called me Mom after 2 weeks, and I thought my heart would split open. She fit us like she'd always been meant to be there. My parents didn't know what to do with her at first. They weren't openly cruel, just cautious, as if she might break the furniture by existing. Mom asked me one night, when Peggy was already asleep, "Don't you think it's a little odd that she's calling you Mom so fast? I mean, isn't that a red flag? Doesn't it mean she's too clingy?" She said it like she was talking about a stranger's child, not mine. I told her, "It means she finally feels safe." Mom smiled in that tight, pitying way of hers. "Or maybe she just says what she thinks people want to hear." That one stung more than I expected. It was the first time I realized she wasn't just distant. She was looking for proof that the love between us wasn't real. After that, her interest came only in sideways questions. Is she behaving? Sleeping okay? Not too attached? Like attachment was a disease. 2 years later, we were in the final stage of the adoption. Just signatures left. Mom still called it paperwork. Like it was an optional hobby. Then, one morning over coffee, she said, "Let me throw the birthday party this year." She sounded proud of the idea, like she'd discovered generosity. I was surprised, but I wanted to believe her. Maybe she was finally trying. Maybe she wanted to be the grandma she pretended to be in Christmas cards. So I agreed. I told myself it was progress. Really, it was just me wanting to believe people can change. And that kind of hope makes you overlook the obvious. That night, after Peggy finally settled in her room, I waited for my husband to get home. When he came in, I said, "They're leaving." He froze mid-step. "Who's leaving?" "My parents. I'm evicting them." He blinked. "You can do that?" "I Googled it twice, so yes." He set down his keys slowly. "What did they do this time?" "They told Peggy I might return her." He stared at me. "You're kidding." "Wish I was." He sighed, then smiled a little. "Okay, what's the plan?" 30 days notice. Written, signed, laminated. If it makes me feel better. He gave a half laugh. "I'll fire up the printer." We sat at the table, side by side, typing out the words together. 30 days. Polite language. 1 page. When the printer started humming, it sounded like the first real noise of agreement the house had made in years. The next morning, before taking Peggy to school, I slid the envelope across the kitchen table. Mom was stirring sugar into her coffee. Dad was pretending to read the news. "What's this?" Mom asked. "Notice to vacate," I said. 30 days. For a second, she just stared. Then she laughed, like I'd handed her a coupon for a joke shop. "Very funny." I didn't smile. "It's not a joke." Dad frowned. "Julia, this is ridiculous." "No," I said. "What was ridiculous was what you said to Peggy." Mom's expression hardened. "We're family." "Exactly." I took Peggy's hand and left for school. When we came back that afternoon, the envelope was gone from the table, but nothing else had changed. The silence in the house had a weight to it, thick enough to trip over. That evening, they were waiting for me in the living room. No TV, no phones, just the two of them sitting upright like they were about to deliver a sermon. "Can we talk?" Mom asked. "Go ahead." "We just don't understand why you're doing this," she said. Her voice was soft, measured, the one she used for doctors and priests. "You told my child she isn't family," I said. "That's reason enough." Dad cleared his throat. You're taking this out of context. Context? I said. You told her I might send her back. We were worried about you, Mom said quickly. You don't know what you're getting into. Raising someone else's child isn't mine, I finished for her. She's mine. Mom's lips pressed together. You're being emotional. I'm being a mother. Dad sighed like I'd disappointed him personally. We only wanted to protect you from a mistake. You protected me from nothing, I said. You hurt a child. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then I said, You have 30 days, and walked upstairs. Over the next week, they didn't talk to me directly. They just lived louder. Cabinet doors closed harder. The TV volume climbed a little higher each night. Mom baked cookies and left them on the counter like a peace offering from someone who didn't understand the crime. Dad reorganized the garage without asking. I found 2 of Peggy's toys in a box marked trash. Peggy noticed the tension. Kids always do. She'd whisper, Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me? And every time I'd tell her no. But she didn't believe it, and neither did I. By day 5, my sister arrived. No warning, just a knock and then her voice in the hall. Wow, she said, stepping inside like she owned the place. You actually did it. I kept my tone flat. Coffee? She shook her head. They called me. They're heartbroken. I'm sure they are, I said. Losing free rent'll do that to people. Wow, she said. Listen to yourself. They're your parents. They're adults. Adults who told my daughter she isn't really mine. Her mouth twitched. They were just worried about you. Everyone thinks you rushed into this adoption. Everyone meaning you. I have 3 kids, she said. I know what hard looks like. Then you also know not to aim it at a child. That earned me a glare. You should be taking care of them. You're older. You have more bedrooms. I can't, she snapped. My house is full, and my husband would never agree. You've got 1 child, one who's not even... She stopped. Not even what? I asked. Her face went pale. Forget it. Can't, I said. You said it out loud. She grabbed her bag. You're impossible. Thanks for stopping by, I said as she stormed out. The door slammed, shaking the frame. Peggy flinched upstairs. I heard her small footsteps crossing the floor. Another mess to clean up later. That night, the house finally quieted. Peggy sat at the kitchen table coloring a picture of a cat with a crown. The crown was crooked. The cat looked furious. She looked up and asked, Are they still mad? I don't know, I said. Maybe they're just embarrassed. Will they go away? Yes. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring. For a few minutes, the only sound was the scrape of her pencil. Upstairs, no movement, no TV, no murmuring. It was the first calm the house had had in months. I stood there, listening to the silence settle around us, and I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The worst part hadn't even started. The week after the party felt almost calm until the knock came. I was halfway through making lunch when someone banged on the door hard enough to rattle the glass. For a second, I thought my parents had locked themselves out again. Then I saw the car in the driveway, a dark sedan with government plates, and my stomach dropped. When I opened the door, a woman in a gray coat stood there with a clipboard, a uniformed officer just behind her. Mrs. Thompson? She asked. I'm from Child Protective Services. We received a report concerning your daughter. Every noise in the house stopped. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Behind me, I heard footsteps on the stairs, my mother's, and that fake surprise in her voice that made everything worse. Oh my goodness, what's this about? The social worker smiled politely, the kind of smile that means, don't lie to me, I've heard everything before. I'll just need to speak with everyone in the household, she said. I stepped aside. Come in. The next 40 minutes felt like an interrogation disguised as tea. Peggy went first. They took her into the spare room. I heard her voice rise and fall, quiet, careful, like she was reciting answers on a test. Every time she laughed softly, relief and dread tangled in my chest. Then it was my turn. The questions were routine. School, meals, medical care. I had every answer ready because that's who I am, the woman with the folder, the planner, the one who doesn't forget immunization dates. The social worker nodded, made notes, asked to see Peggy's room. I opened the door like a lawyer presenting evidence. Bed made, homework on the desk, the small notebook open to a page covered in sketches of cats wearing crowns. She smiled faintly. She likes to draw. She's good at it, I said, too quickly. Better than me, anyway. When the worker left to speak to my parents, I stayed in the hallway. I couldn't hear words, just tones. My mother's syrupy kindness. My father's low, serious murmurs, the kind of voices people use when they're trying to sound cooperative while quietly loading the gun. Time stretched. The smell of coffee turned sour. I wanted to burst in and scream, "You're lying!" But all I could do was sit on the stairs and imagine every possible version of the story they were telling. Finally, the door opened. The worker smiled the same neutral smile. "Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch once we've written everything up. No reassurance. No hint of belief. Just professional distance." As the door shut behind her, my parents exchanged a look. Tiny, smug, victorious. And just like that, I knew. They'd done it. They'd called. That evening, I found them in the living room, watching a game show like nothing had happened. "You called CPS," I said. Mom turned down the volume, feigning confusion. "I'm sorry?" "Don't," I said. I heard her tone. "I saw your faces." Dad gave a small laugh. "If someone contacted them, maybe they were concerned." "People talk." "People?" I repeated. "Or you?" Mom put a hand to her chest. "Julia, you're being paranoid." We'd never do something like that. I looked at her. "You already did worse." For once, she didn't have an answer. "You're leaving," I said quietly. "Sooner than 30 days. She scoffed. "You can't do that." "I can, and I will." I turned off the TV, walked out, and locked myself in my room before they could say anything else. I lay awake half the night, waiting for the sound of Peggy crying. It never came, but I still couldn't sleep. The next day, I made good on my promise. While they were out for groceries, I changed the Wi-Fi password, removed the TV remote, and printed a new letter, 1 week's notice. I taped it to their bedroom door like a crime scene notice. On the fridge, I left a typed list of rules: kitchen and upstairs bathroom only, no guests, no shared spaces. It wasn't revenge. It was containment. When they came home and saw the note, Mom called my name like she was summoning a child who'd misbehaved. I didn't answer. She stormed into the kitchen. "This is childish." "I learned from the best," I said. Her face flushed. "You can't treat your parents this way. You stopped being parents the minute you endangered my child." That shut her down. She muttered something about how I'd regret it and retreated upstairs. The Wi-Fi cut probably hurt more than the notice. The house changed overnight. No more TV blaring. No more background commentary from the peanut gallery. Peggy sang to herself while drawing, and for a moment it almost felt normal. Then, late that afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "This is Child Protective Services," the voice said. "We're still reviewing notes and may need a follow-up." Her tone was neutral, too neutral. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the phone like it might explode. When I told my husband, he tried to reassure me. "They'll see through it." But he didn't sound certain. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every car passing outside felt like it might stop at our door again. 2 days later, the quiet ended. Mom and Dad went out to visit friends. They were gone for hours. By evening, my phone started pinging. Facebook notifications. Dozens of them. I opened the app and there it was. A photo of our hallway, boxes stacked by the wall. Caption: abandoned by our own daughter. Some people forget who raised them. Comment section: pity emojis, outrage, sympathy from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Aunt Linda's comment: so heartbreaking. I scrolled through them all, shaking, half laughing. Of course, I muttered. Of course they did. It wasn't enough to humiliate me in my own house. They needed an audience. So I wrote one post. Just one. At my daughter's birthday, my parents humiliated her in front of everyone. Then they called CPS with false claims. The investigation is still open. I'm protecting my child. No insults, no details, just truth. Within an hour, the tide turned. Comments flooded in. Good for you. Proud of you for standing up for her. And from an old family friend, we all knew how they treated you. By midnight, Mom's post had vanished. The silence online was louder than before. A week later, I heard the sound of wheels on the hardwood. Suitcases. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't need to. Mom's voice carried up easily. We're leaving. I stayed in the doorway of Peggy's room and called back. I know. A long pause, then Dad's voice, low. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But not today. The door closed behind them. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel divided. It just felt quiet. Peggy and I made pancakes for dinner. She spilled syrup on the counter, and I didn't even care. When she looked up and said, Is it just us now? I said, Yeah, it's just us. She grinned. Good. 2 days later, an email arrived. Thank you for your cooperation. After review, we found no concerns and are closing the file. No further action required. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my husband. Then I sat on the couch, exhaled, and let the weight fall away. Peggy climbed beside me with her notebook, the one full of lists and crooked crowns, and leaned her head on my arm. We watched the rain slide down the windows. For once, there was nothing to fix. I can hear the quiet, she whispered. Me too, I said. And for the first time in weeks, it finally felt like home. 6 months later, the silence was permanent. No calls, no birthdays, no just checking in. I was no contact with my parents and my sister, and honestly, the peace was worth every ounce of awkward family gossip that followed. Word still traveled, though. My parents had expected my siblings to save them. After all, they'd spent decades saving them. But Lily claimed her house was too small, and Adam, the golden boy with the 6-figure job, suddenly discovered the art of being unavailable. So my parents unretired. Mom stocked shelves at a grocery store. Dad pushed carts at a hardware store. It wasn't cruel satisfaction I felt. It was clarity. For years I'd carried them, and when I stopped, they finally felt the weight for themselves. And the irony? They still worshipped my siblings. Adam's so busy, Mom told someone once. We don't want to bother him. Of course not. Heaven forbid the favorite be inconvenienced. Meanwhile, life in our house finally felt whole. Peggy's adoption was finalized last month. The hearing itself took 5 minutes. The wait to get there took years. Now her name matches ours, officially and forever. We celebrated with pancakes for dinner and a movie she didn't finish because she fell asleep halfway through. Safe, loved, home. So what do you think? Did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.